Okay.
Hey there.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you all for joining us. I'll call the meeting to order here. Tony Townsend is participating remotely due to a medical condition that prevents his physical attendance. Otherwise, we're meeting here in person in Northside Library. Thank you all for being here. David has our agenda for today, so I'll turn it over to him.
Okay, well, thank you. So this is our Board Technology Committee meeting. We've got a few new faces here. I want to welcome Thomas Unsworth, trustee from Albemarle County, as the new chair of this body. So thank you, Thomas, for taking on that role. And the first thing we wanted to do was to introduce Michael Oden, JMRL's new technology services librarian, who has been at JMRL for 3 days. So a font of institutional knowledge already. Michael coming to us from Cobb County, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, where he was supervising adult services librarian. In his previous role, Michael taught bi-weekly computer classes and organized programming to showcase 3D printing, virtual reality, and library databases. Michael's coming on to help JMRL reimagine the Monad Computer Lab as a digital learning lab to connect patrons with new and unfamiliar technologies to help them meet their information-seeking needs. Michael will be replacing Stella Poole on this committee. Michael, anything to add?
No, not really. Hello everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm eager to get started and start participating, and still just want to learn as much as possible.
I think we went through some introductions here, and of course you know Kayla already. The only other attendee is Tony Townsend, who's the JMRL's board president, who is attending virtually as well.
Welcome. Glad to have you on board.
Okay, so the first agenda item was a discussion of the server migration progress, which I think I'll go through some bullet points, and then Sarah just jump in with any.
Can I ask a question on the last item? I would just like to be reminded what the 5-year plan says about Monticello Avenue. You just mentioned a reimagining, and I think we're at sort of an inflection point. Could we just review that for 3 minutes? What the status is and sort of the plans, and
sure,
to the extent that we have something to talk about or
yeah. So we can look at what the 5-year plan, which is,
or you can just summarize that part of it from.
I believe it says review Monticello Avenue and come up with a strategy for.
So that's where we literally are in sort of an inflection point.
Correct.
And Michael is sort of the lead, maybe, of
correct.
Taking stock and coming up with ideas.
Well, if we don't need to see the exact goal,
yeah, I don't need to
the
see
goal says something like, analyze the usage and try to chart a path forward there. So when we talk about MonAb, we're talking about 2 services really that go hand in hand. There's the physical computer lab at the central library, and then there is the Monticello area virtual village, which is a web hosting service that JMRL provides for people or in organizations, rather nonprofit organizations in Charlottesville and Albemarle specifically, because those are the funding bodies for MonAb. So we currently host a server that has activity on it. There are probably 30-ish local organizations that make use of that. In the last few years, we have focused on how to best meet the needs of those clients, right? So is it to continue to host a server locally when there are now lots of other options out there for web hosting? So one of Michael's jobs in the next year is going to be to look at that service, look at what the needs of the users are, and then to help transition them either to a new server on our end or to some other service that we can kind of handhold people to. When we started an analysis before Stella left, we did find that there was some very regular usage of those sites, including, I think I mentioned one, there was a community group that met every Sunday that was doing things via Zoom, and they were hosting it on avenue.org. So it was that was the portal that they were using to serve their community there. So quickly found that we couldn't just shut something off when there were people depending on it. So that's one prong for what's going to happen. And then the physical lab itself, we have had shortened hours for quite a while now. When Stella was in the peak of that department, had a full-time employee and then 2 part-time employees to manage the same schedule that the central library was open. It has been down to 1 part-time employee who has kept it open Monday through Friday in the mornings, basically. So Michael's going to spend time with that employee, hire to keep the lab open more, but then have it less of a computer lab that's open and available for the public to use, because we have those services all across JMRL, including downstairs at the lower level of the central library, and more of a concierge service to introduce people to technologies that they're not familiar with.
Sort of a training type of role.
So some of that will be like, here's the things that references housed, like we have 3D printing, we have digitization of if you've got slides or VHS tapes, here's how to use some of our databases, working with the reference department on that. And some of it will be all the way back down to somebody needs help, using a mouse in order to apply for a job, right? So the same types of skills that we're teaching now, but we'll be able to offer a small scale one-on-one type environment. And the last thing that we're going to ask Michael to do is to help manage. JMRL is interested in moving both our internal training resources to a new platform and also hosting our public-facing virtual program. So including all the board meetings that we've had for the last few years. They're currently on a YouTube site just available, which is great. They're all out there, but we'd like to get those better organized. So we've got a tool that we're getting ready to set up that would have on the staff side to be able to host all of our recorded trainings and things like that, and then do something similar on the public side where we can host our programs there and then also record training and have them available, called Niche Academy. Service.
Okay.
So that's where we are right now.
Okay. And then probably at this committee, we'll get it sort of an update down the road, not next time, but within a year type of thing.
Let Michael get his feet wet, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Does that sound right, Michael? Still in the right place?
Everything sounded good to me.
Okay, thanks for the question, Mike, and we'll look back on what the actual goal says in the 5-year plan.
Yeah, it sounds like it's broad and we're appropriately taking stock and kind of making plans.
I think that the need for a dedicated physical computer lab with the human resources that went into that has been less during COVID as people have found other avenues. And we were already seeing kind of declining usage coming in there. So that's not to say that we won't still have a need. There won't potentially be hours that are just open to the public there, but we're gonna have to move some of the things around physically.
The first part of the hosting part is the part to me that, as you pointed out, there's so many options now that seems like it's a less in our wheelhouse. So, but anyways, I'll wait to hear what we assess.
Okay. So on to the server migration.
Yes.
Process.
Thank you for humoring that interruption.
So the last time this body met was in the late winter, I believe. And at that point, when we're talking about a server migration, we're talking about migrating JMRL's web resources onto it. So that includes a bunch of different things, but largely our website, our intranet, our meeting room booking system, our calendaring for our, that's not actually done, that's in the cloud, but a few other things. So all the pieces that the public uses and the staff uses on the website, right? A request for a quote went out in April, closed on May 6th, was closed, awarded, and the first kickoff meeting was held in June with an outfit called Contigix. They provided analysis and inventory and started a cleanup project that Sarah is actually working on. I stole some of her notes here to show to the extent of what was required or what is still required.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of finding all the orphan files and figuring out what needs to be moved over and what is no longer mission critical for JMRL. So I'm happy to share this with those of you that are interested in seeing what actually is the inventory of the current websites and then potentially what needs to move over during the migration process. So this has been a very long and involved process for Sarah. I don't need to scroll through all this.
Yeah.
I'm getting a kick out of some of the orphan.
There's stuff every day. Sarah just telling me about something. She was telling me about finding video files of a tour of the bookmobile from 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And some of, we have to make decisions about, well, what do we want to keep, what will we archive, and what needs to be gone. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is not just the public-facing website. Really, there are 8 discrete projects that need to be migrated. There's the website, the meeting room booking system, the staff intranet, the Find It catalog, and 4 other things, which I don't know off the top of my head.
The Hours app, the virtual card application, like our banner app and our online card applications, some various scripts to interface with Trumba, our calendaring system, and the beta site. Basically, all these pieces are between 2 different servers, and they're all being on one server, and then with some cleanup that they recommended us do before we put it all on the new server, which I found gigabytes of stuff that really cleaned up. So therefore, we're not migrating gigabytes of legacy things.
That migration is midway right now. This Friday is actually the target date for all data to complete migration. So everything should be moved over, correct, to the new server Friday?
For what they're moving over, I'm also part of this. I'm taking advantage of the opportunity to upgrade some of our software. So the meeting room booking system, it was 10 years out of date. And so I just upgraded that, and I actually migrated that myself. So yes, everything during this week, everything's being moved over and upgraded.
Thank you for taking the time to come to this meeting.
It's a lot.
At that point, we're anticipating some testing of the new server, poking holes at it. Sarah mentioned new or upgraded applications, making sure they all still work as we're expecting. Once we're satisfied and Contigix is satisfied that everything is testing well and that the little fawn would be ready to stand up on its own in the world, we'll begin a DNS migration to point everything towards the new server, and that'll be the end of the server migration project. So we're expecting that hopefully within a few weeks here to get everything onto this tool. Okay.
Catalog is not included with, I didn't hear you say the word catalog.
The Find It catalog interface is part of this migration. So that uses the View Find software. Now,
Which is a front end to the.
Correct. The database itself,
Yeah.
it's not moving.
Yeah.
yeah, the database is not moving, but
And
the
yeah.
indexing software Solar is part of this migration. So that's part of that is the software that
Okay. So Find It keeps like a separate index into the catalog.
It indexes is daily,
it indexes hourly.
hourly.
Updates from Innovative Sierra or catalog, and it also maintains its own database of book lists. So when you make a book list, that's in Find its own database. So
So the actual database that holds the patron records, the item records, the bibliographic records sits with our vendor for our catalog system for the RILS.
And that's do we physically premise that?
No.
No, okay. It's a different class, it's a different vendor.
It's a different vendor that has it on an AWS server.
Got it.
So it is hopefully secure with Amazon out in the world, because that is our biggest trust.
Cool. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Is that information. Okay, so there we go. So this has been Sarah's big project for the last 6 months or more, and really the lead up time to that was making sure that we had the right tool in place to host and to have our whole digital services all in one place. Any questions about that progress?
Sounds like a huge project.
It's been very, from my point of view, it's been very smooth. There have been no outages, nothing like that. I guess the potential in the next few weeks would be if something goes haywire.
yeah, we're getting to the point where yes, my stress level will go up. But this is all I mean, we're refabbing a house here, and I was giving David the analogy of while we're there, we're redoing the plumbing and stuff like that, and just doing a lot of infrastructure that did not have attention. Also, Contigix this is a move to get everything on AWS as well. So this is very much needed and a good move. It's just
One of the things I think we were looking for was for server-side support, admin support, which we do not have an in-house admin. We have our own IT department, but they are largely focused on our staff and public facing hardware, things like that. So
Desktops.
we don't contract with the city of Charlottesville for sysadmin services, just networking services. So part of the package with Contigix is that they will manage servers for us as well.
I can blame them for things that don't work on the server. I have someone else to call. So, yes.
Well, we're looking forward to having a responsive vendor that we can contact when there is a problem.
Yes.
Okay, so once that project is complete, then the focus shifts to beta and moving data over to be the main website interface. Right now, Sarah is basically holding up two public-facing websites. So every time a staff member puts in, okay, this needs to change on the website, there are beta and the classic catalog need to be changed. So we're looking at a date in the nearest future where that moves over to one thing that's being updated and the classic is not. But a ways to go between now and then. So first is the continue the content cleanup on beta. So beta.jmrl.org is our prototype website. It has been up now in its current state for
2.5 years.
2.5 years, right?
Yeah.
It's been available to the public. It the features on it are hardy and have for the most part stood up. You know, the great things about moving to a Drupal platform there have worked, but there's a lot that still is not complete. There are holes in it. There are content holes. There are images. There's some design that needs to be done basically to maintain a consistent presence throughout. We've had a lot of discussions about what that design should look like. We've had discussions with Mike about what the design should look like with outside parties internally. So some of that work still needs to be done once the migration is finished. So we're calling that kind of an internal design review there before we would do an actual DNS shift there, in which we would point jmrl.org towards what's currently beta.jmrl.org. The goal there now, which has been a never moving goal, is by the end of this calendar year, so within the next few months there, we'll complete design review, make the changes that we decide upon, finish the content cleanup,
Mhm.
and then be ready to call beta.jmrl.org or jmrl.org. I think, you know, in the past, I remember Kayla's predecessor saying that that we were 95% of the way towards a completed beta, and I think my impression of it was that it was the bones of the house really, and not the finishes on the house there. So while all of that has held strong, there's still some work that needs to be done on the finishes of the house, which is what people are looking for when they buy it. Don't ask me about rats in the house. Right? That's a different conversation.
We're doing cleanup. We'll get all this stuff out.
And then also in that time period, beginning a process of developing to get user feedback as well, which we've also talked about quite a bit. Currently, beta has generic. You can email us with comments about beta.jmrl.org, but we haven't had a systematic way to collect public feedback or to seek out public feedback. So I'm interested in targeted feedback as well.
Well, since beta was launched, all of a sudden there was not access to in-person stuff because we stopped doing in-person stuff. So as we now people are more comfortable doing in-person interviews and user testing and whatnot. That's what we want to move forward to do. But my predecessor collected enough feedback. We're doing enough internal review that I'm happy to start doing that user testing after we put beta as the main website and then start to really get feedback. And in certain different user groups, different personas.
So my recollection from sort of the previous time that we had this roadmap review, there was a talk about a soft launch period or milestone. How does that map to what I think what I'm hearing is we're gonna finish things up into a V0 and turn it on. And that's what everybody's going to be using. Is that, first of all, do I have that correct? And secondly, is that the same as a soft launch? Or is that soft launch concept still part of the work roadmap?
Yeah, you are correct. You are remembered correctly. I did propose doing a sort of soft launch and giving users options of going to the old site or going to the new site. But this is dragging on long enough that I'm really getting over having users use the old site, not finding content. I think I'm just very confident the new site will meet the needs of our patrons enough that I'd like to just.
So my thought is, I definitely understand the cost that we're incurring right now of maintaining two things and spending more and more time on what's ahead and wanting to spend less and less time maintaining what's already there. I think once it goes live, your ability to make substantial changes in response to feedback is a lot less, because every thing I click on, I'm used to. You're talking about a group of people. Some of the people are going to be used to some of the stuff, and when you start changing things that people are used to, there's a cost to that for a segment of the users as well. So I'm just, in my mind, trying to think through what the balance is of these trade-offs that I'm.
I agree. There is a cost and a loss. When you change where things are, you change up the experience on users. I'm very confident that the new site is intuitive and clear for the main top 8 things that our patrons are looking for, our users are looking for, our different users too. There is actually more of a cost to my time and ability to support that new site if I'm still supporting the old site.
Yeah, absolutely.
As an example, I'm tracking tickets of how many requests for content changes I get every month. August had 260. So if I'm doing that between these two different sites, it's been taking away from my ability to maintain or improve the new site. And I think there's less of a cost to moving to the new site and being able to fully support that and fully support our patrons in using that and improving that than trying to balance the two. And you're going to have some patrons that will never want to leave the old site because they're so used to it. It is a Band-Aid. How gentle we are. I mean, that we can talk about that, but I really
I think when it comes to not the cost of Sarah's time, but when it comes to the actual server costs, we are ready on a month-to-month basis. We're ready to turn off the old server, but I think we've budgeted to support it for a while, as long as we need it.
that's another variable too. Yeah, so patrons' attention and stress and time, my time, and the actual server hosting costs. But really, I hate to lose so much time trying to support the legacy site, and I could be giving so much more attention to making a better experience based on feedback.
But that's what I'm speaking to is what I think I'm hearing is we're going to make a better experience based on feedback of something that's already the primary production site that people are using and kind of looking at. The soft launch model, as I understood it, was we would do that feedback and those tweaks and those improvements while we're in the secondary role, so that people have an expectation that this isn't the main site. It's something that's under development, and that you can expect things to change around.
Oh, well, I had talked about doing that before, but that was prior to kind of understanding the infrastructure and migration needs that have been taking so much time and going along so long. we do have a decent swath of users that have used beta and who have given feedback that I still feel, there's been enough work to narrow down what users are looking for, what they need, and organize beta to support that and to provide that right information that I feel confident that putting beta out there as the main production site and then seeking out more refined feedback, how to improve that experience after the fact.
Yeah, that's
that's
way-
my interpretation
way to-
recommendation.
the way to go.
I think I have two thoughts here. So one, to back up what Sarah just said, I agree with that. I think that your UX work over the last year or so, like, we have a pretty good idea of what people are looking for when they're coming to our websites at this point. So I believe that the structural design of like, how do I get the information that I'm seeking is going to be in good shape by the time we're done with this next few months of internal review here. So I think that is probably fundamentally not going to change that much, and that's not the feedback we're expecting to get, and we could always be wrong about that. That the feedback we're going to get is going to be about design. It's going to be about the look of things, button placement, those types
So
of.
those are the types of things I'm talking about more. I agree with you that the basic structure is
It's going to be better and easier.
where we are, is what it is.
So I think that there's going to be some amount of time here when we are going to be, we're going to be undergoing this internal review, working on things that we know need to change, such as filling out that content, making the design changes that we've discussed. There's going to be some period there in which you're going to have to update both things, and we're going to be doing that. And at that point, we could put a little push on.
Yeah, and what you're describing right now sounds the same to me as the soft launch,
Right.
as I had understood it. So maybe we're saying, hey, we're in soft launch
There is-
now for the next 3
There
months.
is going to be a period in which we're going to have to support both while we're working on making sure that it's ready for that flip over. And we wanted to use that period in order to also collect some feedback.
Absolutely. I mean, we can shout louder to the patrons. Be sure to look at this. This is our prototype because it hasn't been advertised all that much.
Right.
But patrons, it's also well indexed by Google already. Patrons
Yeah, people are
find
finding it.
it easily and certainly have asked questions, and I've gotten some great feedback about organization stuff. So yes, that's part of our internal review and some bug fixes that have come up from users, and then I would like to put it out as a primary and then really target sitting down, being in person, which is where they were wanting to go 2 years ago when they also put it out as beta, and start to really say, where can this be improved? Where are you not finding the information you're looking for, or insight like that?
So I would propose that we would kind of internally call that internal design review period also kind of a soft feedback collection as well, where
Sure.
as we start, when we get to a place where we say, okay, well, this is pretty close to what where we're gonna land, that we could push out, we could do in the new newsletter, something like that. We could put something
Absolutely.
out, that goes out to thousands of people who are already online, right? So we know that they interact with the library online and say, hey, love this brief survey, or please contact us with any thoughts on that.
Do we lose Tony?
Yeah, I believe so, a while ago.
Okay.
So I have
We're recording.
one thought along those lines and one question. So as you know, so some of you know, because we've had some conversations, this concept of the overall design that you're speaking to is something I think is, I'd like to make sure we get it right. And it's also my premise, a premise of mine that may or may not be well-founded. The new one looks a lot like the old one to me, except made sparser and kind of cleaned up. It's never been clear to me that we did a sort of a green field. Here's what it would look like if for example, I've articulated, and I'll sort of recap for Thomas and Michael. There's some trade-offs between just the amount of, is it your goal to present new information and on the front page for users to learn about stuff we want them to know about, but that comes with an attention cost for them to navigate the things that they might want to do. There's also sort of a functionality, hey, getting stuff done versus sort of an aesthetic, using some of your space to present, things that have more of an emotional appeal. And I think you can't get meaningful feedback along those axes. I feel strongly, just from my experience as a product manager, you need to show people two things, and you can't get that feedback from looking at one thing, because users don't. They're not gonna put themselves in the shoe of a designer and say, hey, if you started over and you did it this way, it could be better. You're never gonna get that. You're gonna get, well, this should be blue instead of orange, or this should be bigger or smaller. They're gonna be constrained by what they see in front of them. So I'll just state, I wish that I was hearing more about, hey, we're gonna show a range of, that somewhere in our design process, it had included or would include this sort of A/B where we're showing you options and kind of understanding what you like and don't like as a user about these various comparables, and then you sort of synthesize from that to put together. And I just have not ever understood that has ever been part of our design process. So I'll just say that and put it out.
That was done internally. That was done internally. So there was a committee, or there is a committee, a web committee, that was made up of different staff members who interface with the public in terms of support for questions and finding information, and various technology people. Stella was in that group, and my predecessor. And did we lose stuff? And there was a little bit of that. It wasn't fully a full web design. There was, again, the design that is now is very utilitarian. Pieces of content were decided on, put together, presented, and tweaked. The look and feel then was tweaked based on that. And even preparing to go over all this with everyone today, David, Kayla, and I were talking about various things that might just change, and based on some of the feedback that you've given, yeah, when we've met before, I think that look and feel still can be tweaked. I don't think that that's necessarily a barrier to launching some of the changes that you're talking about will be that great a change on the homepage in particular.
So and everything I'm talking about here is the homepage, just because it's where you tell me the number, what percent of people hit the homepage, and then versus secondary pages. My guess would be an 80-20 type of thing.
Actually, based on because people navigate to the web so much from searches, that has changed. That has changed. For those who just know JMRL.org, yes, but for those who know hours of Greene County Library,
they get there direct.
Yeah, or if you search
so my
name change,
my question,
you'll get. So I'm sorry. So
my question is this: with the stuff you're saying before, that was a really good segue to this, and this is the following is a process. As a trustee, one of the things I think about a lot is managing the overall perceptions of the organization in the public, and that's a website. I think everybody can see the direct tie-in when you hit the website. An impression is formed from whatever you see. It could be, and this is not something I'm advocating, but just as an example, a complete brochure site like the Charlottesville JMRL visitors, where we're showing the beautiful pictures of how great the library is. We're trying to create great impressions. That's, again, I'm just using it as an example. The other extreme is that it's sort of a links text-only browser, and you tab to the next space, and it's only all the functions all the time. And it is in my mind, you know, when we're talking about, for example, that we want to be welcoming to folks. And whenever we have printed reports, one of the trustees asks, well, can we make sure we get the right kind of representation? Other libraries like Evanston they spend some of their precious real estate on on putting out these sorts of impressions. And they made that choice for reasons, I assume. And we've, so far, a different kind of choice has emerged from our process. My process question is, at what level of the organization should that slider bar be chosen? Because I think it has some choices we could make could have this sort of higher level and impression-based types of impacts. Is that, so far I'm just hearing internal staff. I'm not hearing that, and I want to acknowledge that you've been gracious in, I've made some kind of comments along these lines, and you've taken that input in, and I appreciate that. But for the other committee members, I'm really, I guess I'm mostly talking to Thomas and Tony. Is that something where we, as trustees thinking about the overall impressions, sit back and say, hey, this looks good to me, or it doesn't, or is it appropriate from a process standpoint for that to be a different group making that slider bar decision? So, and David, I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I have thoughts.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that seems like an operational decision to me, which this board has entrusted me to do. So I appreciate this feedback, and the staff has spent a lot of time going through this feedback with you about the overall look and design of the website. I think the main takeaway we got was exactly that. Where is this slider bar between the look and feel and the aesthetic of it and the content delivery of it? And that we are nudging the way that I perceive that you're interested in having.
Sorry about that. Everybody still with us?
Ideally, yeah, Tony might not.
Yeah, I can hear it. Did lose audio and freeze for a bit, but
Okay, looks like we lost Tony again. Computer decided to shut down quite suddenly on us.
Yeah, did you lose the Zoom meeting entirely, Kayla?
I was still in it and it just froze, and then it said you're the host now, so I don't know. There.
Mike, are you texting Tony?
And it looks like it kept recording, so should be good.
Well, I think it broke. It broke while we were gone, but that's fine. You know, nothing. The meeting was basically on hold until I came back. Place. Okay, so I think this is an important point that we want to make sure we get Tony's feedback in as well. Can we maybe jump to the technology goals update and then come back to this?
Sure.
Want to wait for him to come back? Any
I hate that
objections?
your argument was disrupted.
Well, yeah,
Well-crafted argument.
technology for you. Yeah, I don't know about well-crafted. Okay, the only other thing that I had thought that this board might be, this committee might be interested in is updates on the technology goals that you all worked so hard on. So Thomas, when you were the president, you might recall. Oh, now Tony's not available because he's driving. So he's I think done. So shall we finish up that conversation then?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I was going to say was that I'm hearing two different things there. There's one which is the where does that slider need to be and who gets to decide that, and then the other is that the design process should be this A/B design concept. And I think that that what you're saying is that would lead into a better where that slider is. But I do believe that at this point that A/B option, unless the board directs me to go back and start over with this project, which we have spent several years and a lot of Sarah's time on, I don't think that is really an option, except when it comes to the level that Sarah is talking about, that we can make changes. We're going to have a lot of flexibility here, but that the bones of this new Drupal site are in place. Okay, so for the other discussion about where that line is, I think that it is the board's job to direct me, right, for where they want that line to be, but then they need to allow me to operationally make that happen. Okay, so I have heard a lot of feedback about where that should be, and it has been incorporated. Staff are working on it. We will make some changes there, but I don't think that the level at which the board would get involved would be, this should be green, not blue, that type of level. That's my thought.
Yeah, and Thomas, do you have thoughts?
No, I kind of would agree with that. I think, your example of when we have the annual report and we discuss like what kind of messaging are we doing by, the photos on the cover, I think is a very different level than this sort of larger scale design of the website. If there's a place in the website already where we have photos and we say we'd like different photos, I see that as being more analogous than saying the board needs to really have a hand in controlling how the messaging of our mission, gets, put into action through the content of the website or the functionality of the website. I agree with David. I think I see this as being a little bit more operational.
So you said you received feedback and put it into play. With that feedback, I think has been just informal. Again, I don't use it. Let me restate. I think what I heard you say is you've received feedback at the board level about this messaging topic. And again, I go back to, I haven't seen that has been part of any formal process. And should it be, I guess I'm hearing no. Is it just the greasy, squeaky wheels that have, made the effort to get that feedback to you? Do other board members, if that's what you're interested in, because you mentioned it, have they known that they have the opportunity to think about this from a messaging standpoint? And to me, I probably wouldn't take it to, it wouldn't be a full board, it would be a committee is how the board usually gets involved, interfaces with this sort of thing.
So it sounds like the web committee did do some of this review work and did do some of this.
It's opaque to me. Understand that happened. It's opaque to me what the priorities were that were identified within those groups, and whether this sort of high level impressions or messaging was part of that priority, or if it was more, hey, we got users and the users need to do stuff and we want to make sure we serve those users. If I had to guess, it would more heavily weighted toward that second half of that, and less heavily weighted because of who I think was in the room. We want to think about the overall impressions that were and the trade-offs involved, in overall impressions that we'll end up presenting by use of this high impact, facility. Yeah, so I go back to you, David. What's the process? What's the right process? And I do appreciate that you've received, and I know that you have been receptive to this sort of informal input, but I haven't. I think you would agree, or would you agree that hasn't been a part of any, defined process?
I mean, I haven't been in every room that discussed this either, but ultimately it's my responsibility. So I look at it more as like we have a new branch opening, right? And typically the trustee level wouldn't come in and say, like, here's the design concept. Here's how I want you to arrive at the design concept for this new branch. And I'm not even talking about architecturally, I'm talking about interior design, So I kind of, the Drupal backbone is the architecture of this new branch. Like that's already been, that's not changing unless it doesn't work.
Sure.
Talking about more design features, and in my mind, that's very similar to what you're talking about, which is the overall picture and impression that we want to give to the public. Right. So if a board member comes to me and has a suggestion about how to go about that design process, if they have a comment or critique about one of the outcomes of that design process for a building itself, then certainly that will be taken into account. And the board is the governing body of this library system, and probably those changes would be made as long as they weren't, okay, well, instead we need to build 2 buildings and let people choose between those 2 buildings.
Well, the analogy would be two sets of
drawings.
drawings.
The Price is Right, where it's like, here's this set and here's that set, right? So I strongly agree with you on your second point here about finding that balance. And when we met in the spring, we had a lot of talk about realizing that not everybody is going to agree on what that balance is between content delivery and overall impressions and designs. And I think that library folks are probably more leaning on one side of that, the content delivery end of it, than on the overall design. But I hear you on the importance of that and the fact that this is, I don't want to open a new branch that people walk in and say, this is dingy, or this looks like it looks like the abandoned store in the mall or something like that.
Well, even with the branch, you could make think about hotels that you can have in Virginia and Charlottesville, you have like a traditional looking hotel that leans into the, sort of the historic terroir of Virginia, or you can have a, super ultra modern, and both would be a good hotel, but they're going to leave the visitor with a different impression.
So I would hope that the board, that what you want is something clean, welcoming, that has a simple design element, but that's very enticing to the eye, that brings people in. It looks professional. I think that's very important, that it looks like it was done professionally, put together professionally, and not just by, like, oh, I did this part, and Sarah did that part, and Kayla did that part, So I think I personally understand your feedback on this. From other board members, I have not heard the same level of feedback. And maybe it's just because this is not their area of interest. It's not their branch, to stretch that analogy farther than it probably should go. But I think we understand where you're coming from there. And I think it's not that far off from where staff are approaching it. I think that we need to take this internal design period, maybe a soft feedback period, work out those things, see what this looks like, and then make final decisions there. At this point, it's hard for me to see a scenario in which we do go back to that A/B testing.
Understood. Okay, so that shaded a little bit away from the process question into sort of outcomes, and I tried to set it up that we wouldn't do that. But I understand. I will acknowledge that from the board level, there has been guidance to you in the form of a website policy that attempted to, lay out some principles, and that came through a committee level. So that's certainly that is part of the framework. The problem is, it's hard to make a high-level document and also give be specific at the same time. So you can sort of point to almost any outcome and justify, yeah, it fits the policy because here's where it's strong. Okay. I appreciate the conversation. And I think I understand the consensus in the room as far as the process question is that it's an operational with feedback from whoever thinks they have useful feedback to submit. So thank you for engaging that question.
And I'm happy to talk more about the process maybe outside of this committee if you want to hear
Well,
more detail about
the
that.
reason I brought it to the committee is because a defensible answer in my mind might have been, oh, that's a committee thing. So that's why I brought it here.
I know how important this is, and I appreciate that you have put so much time and thought into it because it is, you know, our digital branches. So just take as one metric the circulation of digital materials over the last few years. I mean, it has outpaced growth in every other single area that we have, and I think it would be the second busiest branch except for the Northside Library, basically at this point. So clearly, like, this is a way that a lot of our users are interacting with the library. Like, this is their main way. So we want to make sure we get this right.
Well, when I'm still a physical holdout, and it's still, you know, that's how I get my physical materials. Well, with one hold. So it's not only digital users.
Who are using the website.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think to Sarah's point, like, we are finding that I think you're right, that the homepage needs to be the front door of the new branch, but we are finding so many people that are getting to internal.
Yeah, direct through the side door.
Google.
Yep.
In fact, it's a never-ending frustration. People ask Google questions
Yeah.
that only library staff can answer. They'll go to Google and type in on Google Maps, like, hey, you know, what time does the library open today or something? And the assumption is just,
Well, we've also spent some time to make sure that Google and Apple and Yelp are all up to date about our hours. Yeah, on the maps and stuff. So I look forward to improving some of the graphic design elements, and some of the decisions can look a lot like the classic site because we follow the Apple guide that has color palette and some baseline font and guidelines to make everything look as a whole presentation. I do look forward to tweaking this. That's part of why I really wanted to move to it because, boy, I'd love to spend most of my time.
Yeah. Get to do the fun phase is coming up.
You know, it's been coming up for a while. I mean, now I'm really.
That has come out of conversations in the past is the need for more up-to-date photography and high resolution, high definition photography. And that's something that's like an easy, not easy, but that's something that we could put resources towards.
Well, on the board level, if you need resources for that, I'll be happy to figure out whatever I need to do to make it happen. Because I also agree, modern presentation is super important. And we have great stuff to show too. If we just
visually.
if we can just get the, you know, get it the production values.
Yeah, we've discussed some ideas for some better photography, graphic elements that I think would add some of this polish that you're looking for. Professionalism, polish.
Technological. Okay, I just wanted to highlight a few things. And Kayla, are you still there? Okay, great. So jump in for anything that I miss here, but specific goals. So this committee worked very hard. The staff technology advisory committee worked very hard to try and suss out what the part of this, similar to the conversation we were just having about what the board level objectives were, and then what the staff takeaways and goals and objectives were from those. So very good goals now in the 5-year plan. Wanted to highlight Objective 1 including raising cybersecurity awareness for staff. Kayla's working on adding a tool called Know Before, which is used by the city of Charlottesville to help test staff capacity to identify phishing. Already this has included a reporting mechanism that staff have been able to put to use. Some of you may have seen, if follow any of our partner libraries in the Valley Library, so Stanton, Waynesboro, and Augusta. They last few days really have had to deal with a group that is phishing just the people of that area, basically sending them emails saying you owe the library for a lost copy of the Da Vinci Code, click here. And it's coming from, some quasi-official looking thing. So we're all well aware that these attacks are on the rise. I'm glad that we have a tool in place and that Kayla's working on training there. In fact, I got a phishing email recently from a former elected official at one of our jurisdictions, is no longer on that board, but it was the same address, but a different domain. So it was, John Smith at Yahoo instead of John Smith at Gmail. And it just said, do you use Amazon for ordering things? Sorry to bother you.
Mhm.
And it was close enough that I responded and said, the library uses, and they wrote back and I said, great. Mine's not working. Can you get a gift card and send it to me?
Scratch off the back and send me the numbers.
But it was very clever. So glad that we've got this tool in place now. Objective 3 is a training platform, which we mentioned a little bit, talking about Monab and Michael's responsibilities. Niche Academy is the name of the vendor there. So whether he knows it or not, this is one of Michael's roles. To figure out, my big concern right now is figuring out credentialing for the staff side. If we're going to have something that is just staff only internal training, how to make that easy for staff to get access to, but then still make it squirreled away from the public access. Library board meetings, for example, can be hosted alongside with supplemental materials, which would be nice. So it would be like, here's the board meeting, and then here's also the agenda and the handouts and things like that. For example, we did a new staff orientation a few weeks ago, and it was over 2 separate mornings, it's like 6 hours total. We've had a lot of new staff in the last year, so a lot of content, and that included a slideshow, it included handouts, all those sorts of things. So now those can all be in Niche Academy. So couldn't be there in person. And objective 5 included discussion of the lockers, the hold pickup lockers, and I'll report on this to the full board as well. But the end is in sight for delivery and installation. The last 2 are on their way. Kayla's done a masterful job coordinating this process, keeping staff informed. We're starting a soft rollout with the Louisa branch first. It was the first one to be installed. So we're going to make it available for people to place holds and pick things up at that locker. 2 of them did come in damaged, had to be shipped back out and shipped back in. So there's been some delays in that process. Once Gordon's and Crozets are Crozets is a bigger units. It's got basically twice the amount of blockers. Then we'll do a whole PR push for they're all available. So those are just basically highlights for things that have been accomplished towards the goals that this group proposed in the spring of last year.
Niche Academy so I get little emails from them, which I don't remember signing up for. No, directly from Niche Academy. And they're usually presenting webinars and so forth that are content from third party or from them that they're offering me. So it's that, obviously, but am I hearing it's also a platform for us to present our own training materials?
Yeah. And I'm guessing that the reason you get them is because the Library of Virginia uses Niche Academy. Yeah. And they as a BLA member, maybe they are sending some information out. So the way they use it is strictly as a platform. Like they build their own trainings, or they host webinars or things like that, and then they host them there on Niche Academy so that they're available after the fact.
Just because I hadn't seen that from these
right.
emails, I didn't understand that it was also
They do have some of their own content as well,
yeah.
But it would have to be reviewed and just post it up for our staff without looking through it first. So the training academy.
Thanks.
Kayla, did I skip anything there? Was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you've got it. Everything else is in each of those goal categories. We're making progress. We're planning on progress. We've rehired, had to go out and hire another IT supervisor who will be starting in about 2 weeks. So some of these projects, while we've kept things going in the interim with me and our technical support specialist, technology support specialist, I should say, we have plans to kind of further and explore different things, like a desktop virtualization. Gordon Avenue has new computer tables that help, that IT helped kind of put them in, put the equipment in. And so that puts us in a better place to consider rearranging the types of computers at some point in the future and have it and exploring different options. So.
Okay, thank you. So, Thomas, I think when Wendy was last thinking about this, we were trying to decide how often we would want this body to meet. Quarterly, bi-monthly, 2-3 times a year. It had kind of traditionally been just once a year to review progress on goals, but I think we all agree.
Seem like enough,
Yeah,
right?
it needs to be more often, especially with such big projects.
So I would look to the rest of us here. Kayla, you included there. What do we, is quarterly enough? I'm the newest one, so I don't feel like this is a decision that I am. Well, sure, fair enough.
I would think 2, 3, or 4. For me, if it is just for my own convenience, if the the policy committee meets 6 times a year, the technology committee would meet 3 times a year in half of the off-cycle policies. But it's kind of an awkward number.
That's an interesting way of looking at that. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking quarterly 4 times, but just because it's my world works sometimes in quarters.
Just having seen the cycle there, for a couple of years, I don't know if you really have a lot to go over. And
3 or 4, no more than 4.
yeah, certainly no more. I could also be talking to 2. 2 or 3 seems right.
Well, I would think that we would want, and it may be also kind of project driven, so I think that we would want to, before we get to DNS shift where it's like, okay, well, this is going to be our website. I think that this group would need a chance to talk about it and assess where we are, basically provide feedback. So I would propose at least once before the end of the year, where hopefully we can be, schedule that later. We don't have to schedule it right now.
Well, and if we looked at that schedule of trying to sort of slot them into the off times of the policy committee, would that leave us space before the end of the year to get one more in?
Policy committee's meeting.
Policy is December, I believe, so that would be November if you fell into that pattern. I don't think you don't think that's too soon. It's already October. It's already almost October.
Yeah,
it's 2 months. It would be 2 months from now.
We kind of almost have to the beginning of November because this time in November we're in Halloween. I mean, in the Thanksgiving and all of that.
Yeah, and just things always come up.
And I don't know. I mean, it works well for the policy committee to meet right before the board meetings.
Yeah, it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to be before the board meeting. Like this.
No, I was saying it doesn't have to be deconflicted with policy either, because I haven't ever had a bunch of to-dos coming out of this.
Right.
Where's the policy committee do?
There are to-dos, right?
Well, maybe based on timing, we look to December then to give ourselves a little more time if we need a meeting here before the end of the calendar year. And then as we look at that meeting, because we'll probably have a little bit of a lighter agenda, maybe that would be a good time to look forward into calendar year 23 and try to set 3 of these on that. Yeah, sort of find 3 spaces on the calendar. Excuse me. And if we decide we only need 2 of those at some point, we can always say, hey, we've got 1 thing on the agenda, it's not important, let's push it to the next one and just cancel this meeting. And if that's what we need. Okay. All right. Well, I'll talk to you. We'll send out an email about refining the date in December there as it works. Try to make sure that it's not too early.
Hey, David.
Oh, hello.
Oh, welcome back.
Yeah, remember me? Sorry, guys. I'm sorry, guys. David, could you just remember to send me the link to the recording so I can watch the meeting?
Sure. I think, well, so what happened is while you were away, we lost the recording here. So we're gonna have to stitch the 2 parts together just for a minute or 2, but we had a hardware malfunction.
Okay.
Cool. Why I was texting to see if you were still on, because it did. I think. I'm not sure exactly what happened.
Yeah, no, I had to drop off to drive home. Sorry. So
Okay, sure.
anyway, okay, sounds good. Thank you.
It will be publicly posted as well once it gets once it gets stitched together.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, so we'll try to figure out a time in December that works for everybody and for our next meeting then. And then at that meeting, set forward some times for 23.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
Michael, very nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us here and at JMRL. And thank you, Kayla, for coming. Yeah, bang, bang. We'll adjourn and be all done. Thank you all so much.
Bye, Tony. Bye, Kayla.
Bye.